Hey everyone, this is Nick from Mecha Warehouse, and today I thought we would do kind of a rehash of a video we did last year, which was about photography and posing. The reason I wanted to do this was number one, because the repaired contest submission deadline is less than a week away. I presume a bunch of people still need to take their pictures for that and want to try to help people, especially maybe less experienced people, with some basic tips. And the other half is because of our spotlight submissions. So if you're unaware, we do a spotlight submission thing. We've got a link on our website. We'll have it down in the description or somewhere available where you can check it out. But basically, we spotlight builds from customers and basically anybody who submits them on our social media: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter primarily. And while we get some pictures that are amazing, we also get some that the kit's posed not as well as it could be. The lighting, the photos are just not as good as they could be, and I'm hoping that through kind of giving some suggestions here, it might help bring up the average or the low end of those and help everybody just kind of get better pictures overall. So that's kind of why we're doing this video. We're going to start off with talking about posing. So I've got basically there's 5 basic rules for posing that you need to apply to your kit. I think there's another set that we can talk about after this, but the 5 that get thrown around most commonly. Number 1, the chin of the Gundam or mecha should be down. 2, the shoulders should be even. We don't want one shoulder way up and one down. We also want a slight bend in the elbows. We want an S curve to the overall posture, and we want the knees and more specifically the toes turned outward slightly. So I have here in front of me an RX-78 kit I built a long time ago, probably one of my first kits, but I think it'll be good for this demonstration here. So first off, we want that chin down. We want the shoulders even. We want the S curve, meaning we're going to get a little bit of curve to the torso to put the hips slightly out in front. We're going to open the knees out slightly with that kind of bend to the elbows there, and already it looks a little bit better than those than how it would look if the legs are straight, toes are pointing straight ahead. We often see beginners pose their kits kind of in a very robotic fashion. They are robots, but they don't need to look robotic. So if we think of this in terms of those 5 rules, those are kind of very specific things, and I think that doesn't apply when we start getting to action poses. It doesn't necessarily apply to every kit. Not every kit has a head that can articulate that way. For example, sometimes the torso is more locked and not able to be adjusted. And so when I think of posing, to me, the 4 rules that I think about more specifically than those rules are: number 1 is the pose and posture natural and athletic. I mean, it's not necessarily athletic in that it's a robot, but the same kind of things that apply when we stand or when we move are going to apply to general locomotion of any sort of humanoid type thing. 2, I look at the joints and trying to make sure that they're neutral. So if we've got a joint with 2 points of articulation, like we often do with the knees, one on the top and one on the bottom, making sure that bend is created by both of those is often more realistic and natural than if the knee is only bent at the top or only at the bottom. Of course, that may differ based on what you're trying to accomplish. And then finally, trying to look at what is it going to be doing and why is it doing it. So if we're taking a very aggressive pose, we want the knees bent in a way that makes sense, the hips turned, the head turned in a way that makes sense. We can add some accessories back to this kit and we'll get a cool action pose here. Accessories in, maybe going for some sort of athletic pose, shield across the middle, taking advantage of as much shoulder articulation as we can to get the arm turned around towards the front, and perhaps shooting across the shield here, but thinking about the hips and shoulders to create an athletic stance that would support perhaps shooting this large beam rifle or whatever it is, and getting that kind of pose. And by thinking about all those things, keeping the joints natural, keeping that pose athletic, and trying to think about what it's doing and why it's doing it, plays in a lot. So now when it comes to posing, there's a million different ways you can pose a kit. Basically, the sky's the limit. One thing that you can look at for suggestions on good poses would be directly to the box art itself. Sometimes the box art or even the manual has great examples of poses right in it, and that's a great place to kind of start looking at your favorite scenes, perhaps from the anime or whatever. Can be great as well. Just get another pose here that we can use, and then we'll talk about photography. Okay, let's talk about photography. So there are basically three main areas we need to consider when we're talking about photography, for at least Gunpla photography. Number one is the scene or pose. Number two is the lighting. And number three is the focus and depth of field when we take that photo. So number one, the scene and the pose. We just spent a little while talking about posing a kit. But when we think about the scene in general, where is the kit? What is it in front of? If you are fortunate to have a light box like this, it makes things a lot easier in terms of taking photos of just your kit, and is going to help on the lighting end too. If you don't have that, it can be great to take photos in front of the manual, in front of the box, or anywhere where you can get good light. I've seen tremendous pictures taken outside, and that can solve some of the lighting issues for you there as well. And but thinking about what's that kit with, what's it in front of, things like that. And maybe that's just your workbench, but setting up your workbench in a way to add visual interest in the background, things like that. In terms of lighting, we want very consistent and even lighting if possible. This is where the light box comes in. This one has a row of LEDs across the front and the back, and we can see just by unplugging these that they add quite a bit of light to the scene. Because the lights are kind of spread out and not super focused on the kit, if we had a spotlight here in front, it's going to make a huge difference in how the kit looks. Potentially get glare, especially on an unpainted and untop coated kit like this. This is in a lot of ways almost a worst case, maybe worse if it were gloss coated or something. So in terms of, I'll get the focus on here, I can use this slider on the side to change some brightness settings, and that can help make things a little bit brighter or darker. We want a good amount of contrast. And we can get that kind of focus in there. It's pretty good. The other thing that you want to consider is trying to avoid use of flash. Flash definitely can cause problems, especially again if we've got gloss or just any sort of shiny surface. That flash tends to unnaturally light it, and in my opinion, and I think the opinion of most other people, it doesn't look as good as that even consistent light. And then finally, in terms of focus and depth of view, by changing where the focus is of the image, we can potentially make the focus in the foreground or the background. If we've got a very like a high-end camera or a nice lens, we can really take advantage of this and get the foreground crisply in focus with the rest of the kit perhaps out of focus behind it, or be focused on the main body of it and lose that focus, or have less focus or softer focus on whatever it's holding out towards you. All right, right, so those were just a few quick tips. I'm sure there's people who are plenty more experienced than I am in terms of photography, or will get into depth with different equipment and things like that. But it's definitely possible to take decent pictures on your phone. If you have a light box or something like that, it can help a lot. But fundamentally, getting a halfway decent pose, paying attention to where the focus is, making sure lighting's good, things like that can go a long way to make a picture better and eliminate some of that glare and things like that that just ultimately take away from an otherwise excellent kit. And hopefully that helps. So if you've got your own tips or suggestions, maybe you've got more in-depth experience with this stuff, post it down in the comments below so everybody else can hopefully learn from your experience too. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.